Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Paradigm Shifts podcast with your host, Keisha Kruger. I'm an organization development practitioner and executive coach, working with leaders to create positive changes in the workplace using behavioral science. My personal mission? Share science-based tools and leadership insights from the field that you can use in the workplace and beyond. Considering we spend about 3/4 of our lifetime at work, there is incredible science and organizational psychology that can be used to rethink the way we work, lead, and ultimately live. Join me as I speak with thought leaders and business leaders in practice, unpacking light bulb moments for paradigm shifts. Hey everyone, this week's episode is really special and it might surprise you. I got the opportunity to chat with not one, but two guests on a topic that is personal and meaningful to me. Both of these guests have incredible stories that I will share at length in the show notes, but here's a quick intro before we jump into the episode. First up, we have Master Instructor Keith Olson, who is a 6th degree black belt in Taekwondo and a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with Olson's Martial Arts Academy. He became a professional MMA fighter in 2018. Next up, we have Mike Streicher, owner of Karate Charlotte and co-owner of Queen City Jiu-Jitsu. Mike started his martial arts journey in 1987. He is a 4th degree black belt in Taekwondo and a certified instructor through the American Martial Arts Institute of America. Together, Mike and Keith have plans to spread the benefits of martial arts in the form of an online game, diving into the NFT gaming and metaverse world, which they believe is going to greatly impact our future generation. For more of what got Mike and Keith started in martial arts, more on their academies, and to learn more about their game, be sure to check out the show notes. Hi, Keith. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Good morning. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you both for being here.
Glad to be here.
So excited. For those who tune in to my podcast regularly and listen to some of these other episodes that I have, this topic might feel a little off-brand, but in reality, I think there's plenty in common at the intersection between Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and leadership, and I can make a case for some of the other skills that BJJ supports development around for other areas of my discipline, which is, besides leadership development, there's change management and learning and development. And this topic's kind of personal for me because, as you both know, I do train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and I've developed such an affinity for this sport. So that's kind of what I want to explore in today's episode with both of you is the intersection between BJJ and leadership. But for those who may not be familiar, can we just go over what is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Either of you could chime in.
Sure, I'll jump in first. So Jiu-Jitsu translated as the gentle art, and it's the gentle art. Might not be the nice art sometimes, because you are trying to, get different submissions, and whether it be a choke or an arm lock or a shoulder lock or a foot lock on your opponent. But it is an art of self-defense that, it is, it's reactionary, so it's not an aggressive martial art. It's a defensive martial art. What to do if someone attacks you standing up, how to escape bad positions on the ground, how to control an opponent, and then eventually get the submission, which would be the arm lock or the choke or something along that nature.
Awesome. Anything to add there, Mike?
Yeah, the same thing. I love jiu-jitsu because it is so self-defense based. I actually got into martial arts in general as a young kid because of bullying. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of the worst situations ever being put into as a kid was a headlock. And mm-hmm. I didn't know what to do and I got hit and it was the worst thing ever. And I said, I don't want that to ever happen again. And I enrolled in martial arts classes, and when I look back, I actually never learned how to defend against a headlock until later on. It was crazy. I learned a lot about kicking, punching, blocking, and it really, martial arts in general is going to build your confidence in so many ways. So I never really found myself in those situations again. But when I explored later on in life into jiu-jitsu, one of the first grabs was actually a headlock, and it was really cool to be able to pass that along to our students that might have those same issues.
I love that. It's just prevention, right? Yeah. Going back to that reactionary defensive position that jiu-jitsu takes. And both of you have incredible careers in BJJ and other martial arts forms. So what was the moment that led you to start training, if you can remember back It's been a
Actually, I
while.
do remember this. So I was up in Johnson City visiting Master Olson and his family, and I don't even remember what we were doing. I think we were just doing a training on weapons or something, and we got to the end of the night. Training was done, and I think we were hanging out. We had lunch or something, and Master Keith Olson said, "You want to take a ride up, do some jiu-jitsu?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Where are we going?" He said, "All right, we're going to go up to Knoxville." And I got a friend up there, Mike Horahan, and we took a drive up. And man, for me, it was life changing. I fell in love with jiu-jitsu that day, working with Mike, and entered into that realm. So
Incredible.
Yeah,
What about you,
I
Keith?
had a very similar experience. I fell in love with it in one day. Um, I was born into training in Taekwondo, so I've been doing martial arts with my family um, since I was born. I think my mom was teaching class the night before I was born. Um,
Oh
yeah,
my
so
gosh.
I was literally,
Wow.
you know, I've been on the mat, my whole life, and so I was introduced into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when I was 17 years old, and so a friend of mine said, "Hey," he trained Taekwondo with me, and he said, "Hey, let's go try out this Jiu-Jitsu place. I have a friend doing it." So I go there, and I was 17, I was in shape, feeling really strong, and I remember the first day they paired me up with a tiny little 14-year-old kid, and very nicely, he just wiped the floor with me for about an hour. His name was Craig. I still remember him to this day. This was about 15 years ago, and I just could not believe that he handled me with such ease. He was barely sweating. I was dying, and so it was that day. I was like, man, I fell in love with it, and I said I have to be able to do this.
You still fell in love with it after he wiped the floor with
He
you?
did it so nicely, and just with such control. I was like, man, this is just an amazing art.
Yeah, you guys mentioned a few different other forms of martial arts like Taekwondo. What do you think is like the biggest difference between Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and your training with other forms?
man, that's a great question. So I actually frequently get this question when new people walk in exploring martial arts, and one of the first questions I get is, which one is the best? And in my
Mm.
mind, I don't think there's any one art that's better than the other. I think they all have different strengths and weaknesses. And it's really, as a practitioner, it's how we're using what we learn. And, sometimes body styles and strength can have a lot to do with that as well. But all martial arts, in my opinion, are good if they're used the right way. So,
So how you apply it.
yes. And, like jujitsu, has a lot of strengths from standing self-defense, with different types of attacks, but it has a tremendous amount of skill from the bottom where if somebody's on top of you in a bad situation, teaching you how to get out of this. And you'll see this portrayed in a lot of like the UFC fights where people are
Hmm.
maybe stuck on the ground in a headlock position and the other guy is punching away, and knowing how to get out of those situations.
Kind of desensitizes you to potential dangerous events that would happen, right? Like if you are in a bar and someone grabs you, you're not as likely to react in a negative way, but in a more astute way that could, more controlled way that's safe for yourself, for the other individual, for everyone around. That's kind of what I've noticed. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Keith, do you have anything to add around differences that you've seen between like other forms of martial arts and BJJ?
So from the outside looking in, a lot of the martial arts are very different. The longer you train martial arts and in different martial arts, the more you realize how similar they all are,
Hmm.
uh, which is really interesting. And I'm still young in martial arts, in comparison to a lot of other people, but I'm starting to find that true. Because I've gotten the chance to train in boxing, mixed martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, Taekwondo, and others, and you start to realize, oh, I learned this in a boxing class. I learned this in a jiu-jitsu class and taekwondo, and you start to see a lot of similarities in them. So,
Hmm.
but some obvious ones that stand out that maybe some hurdles people have to get over in Brazilian jiu-jitsu is the close proximity that you are with your training partners and things like that. And So that's maybe a difficult one that can be difficult to get used to. But if you approach it with the right mindset of we're training with self-defense in mind, and how to escape these bad positions, and really getting comfortable in the uncomfortable positions, is what's going to help you in the long run.
Absolutely. I love that. Some of the characteristics, now we're going to move to a little bit more talk around leadership, but some of the characteristics that I've noticed of effective leadership is communicating effectively, a willingness to accept their mistakes and failures, that humility, having strong emotional intelligence. So, what do you think can BJJ or Brazilian Jiu Jitsu teach people about leadership?
Uh, I'll go first, Mike. Okay, so there's such a different array of people that come in to train martial arts, and so it might have someone come in that's very timid and very shy.
Mm.
I want to approach that person learning jiu-jitsu very differently than, let's say, a 19-year-old wrestler that comes in gung-ho and ready for action. And so learning to match people and where they're at, like people have very different starting points, and so you have to recognize that quickly, because I know jiu-jitsu can be great for everyone, but you can quickly turn somebody off of jiu-jitsu if it's approached the wrong way, or if um, you know throw a timid person into a situation that's just going to completely make them uncomfortable. Or someone that maybe has prior experience and is gung-ho, and if you don't keep them challenged, you have to recognize these things very quickly in order to keep them engaged and wanting to come back and get. And we know that the longer they come back, the more benefits they gain from jiu-jitsu. So that there's many ways. I'll let Streicher expand on that, but that's one of the ones that comes to my mind first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100% agree with that, because everybody is different. And, there's, when you have students, you can be talking about adult students are also children. And, with children, it's the same thing. You have some kids that come in that are so shy, you can barely get them to come out on the floor. They're coming out crying the first time. And, you have other kids that are just, they're doing cartwheels onto the floor to get out there and do something. And because they're all different, yeah, you do have to be very careful in how we match them up. And, the long-term goal for all the students is obviously the same from a leadership aspect, is to build on their strengths and try to make their weaknesses a lot stronger. And I think by doing those two things, you can build incredible confidence in that student. And for the kids that started early, I know, Keith, you were really lucky. You were pretty much, I think you were doing karate and kicking and punching right there in the labor room once you came out. I know I started a little bit later in life. And the confidence starting it at such a young age, it just stays with that student for their whole life. And I know, just watching adults come in, most adults that start in martial arts actually start to belong to a group and feel part of a community. And, everybody starts for a different reason, but that is one of the main reasons, is the social aspect of the community and the team. And I know at our schools, and I can speak, I think, for Keith's school too, because I've, been involved with them and trained with them for so many years. That is one thing that we try to have within our academies, is a real group, like a community, like a real friendly, open atmosphere. And it just helps everybody to feel like they belong to a group and a family almost.
Yeah, it's like a lifestyle, right? I noticed that as well. Like once I really got ingrained into the world of BJJ, it's just the community. It feels so big and so small at the same time. Like once you're in and you find someone else that does BJJ, you just feel like that's family. From my experience, at least, maybe you guys have a different perspective.
No,
Yeah, I think pretty much the same when we go and travel around, especially with people that we've known for a lot of years and have trained and seen at different events. You can get along pretty quick with most people that we meet. There are,
Mhm.
some schools that I've traveled to, and I know, Keith, you can probably speak on this too, where atmospheres can be a little bit different. But for the most part, as a community, we have kind of a similar interest. Everybody does get along and has that mutual respect for each other.
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I've had the opportunity to travel the world for martial arts, and even if it's not for martial arts, for instance, my last I went on a business trip with my wife up to Toronto, and so she had to go work for the day, and I went and found a jiu-jitsu gym, and I walk in, and I know nobody in town, but I walk into the jiu-jitsu gym, and I have like 20 friends immediately.
Immediately.
Yeah, it just, you're welcomed with open arms, and you all share that in common, and so yeah, made great friends up in Toronto now. So and that happens everywhere we go.
Yeah, that connection and belonging is so important, and it's a human need, right? I love where you guys went with the managing different personalities as a potential correlation between leadership, because in the world of organizations and in the workplace, leaders have to meet people where they are. They have to focus on those strengths and also not take a blind eye for those weaknesses, but build on them so that eventually they are confident in those areas, to your point, Mike, but also they are more engaged in the workplace because they feel like they can contribute to something outside of themselves. I love that. Humility in terms of a leadership skill. I think there's a lot to talk about here. You guys would have a lot to maybe provide when it comes to humility as a leadership trait and what you've noticed in terms of humility on the mats. What are you seeing? What are your observations?
So I think, and this is true of all martial arts, but with jiu-jitsu, like Keith was kind of explaining his first experience being, the floor was wiped with him. And, I think when you're put in situations where you're losing, you're on top, you can't move, it teaches you to not only use your physical strength, because sometimes physical strength doesn't work, so you might not be able to use your body. But one thing that I remember from learning from Mike Horahan, one of the biggest things I took from him is maybe you're on the bottom and you've got a person that's a lot bigger, a lot stronger. Maybe they're even just better, and you're stuck. You can't get out. Think about what you can do. So if I can't physically move that person, I can move myself. And now you're moving yourself out of that situation as opposed to trying to move that bigger object or bigger person that's stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And, by learning those skills, I think those are important skills to learn on your own before you can teach them to somebody else. Okay. Because if I haven't been in that situation and been able to get out of it in some way or manner, it's going to be very difficult for me to ask another person to do that. So I think you need to be in that situation as a leader before you can ask others to try to do that and expect
The
them.
internal work, yeah.
So, lead by example.
Yeah, that's huge. About you, Keith?
So I think humility is absolutely necessary, especially for longevity in jiu-jitsu. And then that's the tap, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's when you get tapped, it's acknowledging two things. It's half you made a mistake and got caught, and then the other half is that the other person did well by capitalizing on that mistake. And every time you tap, you're acknowledging that. I messed up. You took advantage of it. You caught me. And not having humility is the consequences: broken arm, torn shoulder. Hurting your body. So you're forced to submit, and when you're caught, acknowledge it. Um, and so in order to do jiu-jitsu for a long time, you have to remain humble. I've been caught by students of mine in submissions. I've been caught by lower belts before. And there's a piece of you that doesn't want to tap in that situation, but you have to, or else you're gonna get injured. And but now when my students catch me, or if a lower rank catches me, I'm happy. I'm happy for that person. Like, man, that was awesome. If the technique was great, then man, I'm proud of you. That was absolutely great. So it's definitely shifted over the years where you get proud of your students, or that person that's lower ranked that you know just does a great technique and catches you in the moment, and that so. But overall, the to be able to do jiu-jitsu a long time, you just have that humility.
Yeah, injuries are a quick way to subdue the ego, right?
Very, very quick.
You said there's a part of me that wants to not tap, right? And that's the ego. And no one wants to work for a leader in an organization or in the workplace that can't be willing to accept mistakes or failures, or to own up to something that they might have a part in terms of maybe leading the team off track or leading the organization in the wrong direction. And so having the ability to say, hey, I contributed to this, hey, I'm taking responsibility and accountability for this, is again, being a great role model, being a great example. On the other hand, you've got employees who potentially could work for a leader or manager on the other side of it, where the individual is driven by their ego, and they are almost framing every problem and every challenge as if it's someone else's fault, not their own, right? That victimhood, that victim blaming. And I love that jiu-jitsu is about getting out of a victim mindset, and it's about putting yourself into masterhood. You are in control of your fate in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as a leader too, we need to be looking for failures, within ourselves so that we can get stronger. I know even when our students compete, one of the first things that we tell them is that when you go, it's not always about winning the first, second, or third place trophy, but where can I find some weaknesses to make myself better for the next one? And I think
Yeah.
that's really important to grow and develop.
Self-awareness is huge, and that takes practice. It takes a lot of work to turn inwards and also get feedback from others around you, right? When you're competing, you have all eyes on you, your team, everyone else that's there. They provide you input and feedback. Your coach, as soon as you exit the mat, they're right there saying exactly what you could have done differently. But if you don't have the ability to turn inwards and be vulnerable and listen to that feedback, you're never going to truly take it and apply it to make a difference, right?
Yeah.
So effective communication, how does that play a role on the mats?
So people learn in so many different ways. Uh, and that is something else that you have to recognize quickly and find out how each student's going to learn the best and the quickest. So, some people learn visually by watching, so you need to demonstrate the techniques a number of times, maybe a number of different ways or speeds. Um, you might need to actually have that person feel the technique. They might be a little more tactile. They need to get in there and feel the technique and do the move. That's how I learn more. I learn by somebody doing the technique to me and feeling it. So that's how I typically learn. And some people are more cerebral. You can just sit there and talk about it and they understand it. As in teaching a class, you're trying to hit all three, or more ways of learning. So that way you're trying to hit every student and the way that they learn.
Yeah. So the other skill that I had mentioned up front around leadership was the emotional intelligence. So the ability to regulate your emotions, be able to have empathy, put yourself in other people's shoes. I'm starting to see, you start to see all of these connections, right? All of these soft skills really are the hard stuff. And it's also really, it correlates really nicely with leadership and developing those capabilities in the workplace. And have either of you been able to come off a mat out of training and be able to apply something that maybe was like an aha moment or a reflection from when you were training right into the workplace or right into outside of the mats? Is that something that you've noticed?
I have many.
Like
Yeah,
a leadership lesson, for example, on the mats?
yeah. I think something that hit me the other day. I was looking back at pictures from over the years of all the different kids. I had a mom reach out to me actually last night about doing a really like a self-defense seminar for their whole organization because there's just stuff going on in the world right now. And I was looking through pictures of like the old days when her kids started training with me, and some of them are now married with kids, and some are in college. And as I was looking back at the pictures, something that hit me is one of the pictures that they had posted on social media, and I don't remember if it was Instagram, Facebook, one of those. It was a picture of 5 of the kids that I was teaching. We were actually out of classes this one day. I think it was the 26th of December in 2010 was the date on this, and we had a snowstorm. So there was no classes because nobody could get to classes. But the kids that were training with us, they had went outside and they had their weapons out there. They had their chest guards, the headgear, and they built a snowman out of all the equipment, and then they were practicing, their taekwondo in this particular case outside in the snow and posting pictures of it. And I was like, when I looked at that, I said, wow, that's, it kind of hit me that, the kids that we're teaching, they watch and see everything that we do. So as leaders, we have to make sure we're doing a really great job of leading, to get that kind of a skill set, that they're, they don't have class. They could be out doing something else, but they're still practicing karate. So that impression that we're leaving on them as leaders, I think, is so important.
It's huge, everlasting for sure.
So they were out doing that. They could have been out egging houses or something crazy, that was unproductive.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. Yes. Keith, what about you?
There's so many, but I do have two that kind of come to my head quickly. And number one is patience. Jiu-Jitsu just takes so long to grasp and to get proficient at, and so I feel like it's really made me a more patient person, and realizing that things to do things well takes time, and so in whether it's growing our business or developing other staff members, or whatever skill it is that you're looking at, I just feel like over the last 15 years it's made me a much more patient person, and understanding that it just takes a long time. Things don't happen quickly, and but with persistence and consistent training, showing up to class, putting in the work, putting in the hours, that's what gives you the payoff. And the second thing is actually being more open and relaxed, actually. So I feel like before jiu-jitsu, I was very linear. Here's this is the right way to do it, and that's it. So in jiu-jitsu, there are thousands of ways, or unlimited ways, to get to an armbar, or to get to a triangle, or to get to escape this position, and it's ever evolving. And so to have the answer, well, how do you do an armbar? Well, here's a way. And then I see somebody else do another way, and well, that's also good. That's also another way to get to the armbar. Whether it's maybe a different body type, or something like that. There's so many different ways, and so it's really opened me up to being open to learning from anyone. There's multiple right answers. There's a lot of things that are fundamental and true for everyone, but then there are so many things that also are unique to different styles and body types and ways that people train. And so again, in the workplace, it's made more open. Like, okay, this is the way I would do it, but let's hear from the team. How would everybody else do it? How would everybody? Let's hear your ideas. Okay, that's also a good way to do it. Okay, and that also gets your team more involved and feeling more apart, and I think that creates a stronger team.
Yeah, I love the correlation there, because you're never done learning. Just when you think you've learned, another 10, ways to do something, you realize that once you meet a new group of people or you go to a different school, there's even more than you thought, right? So you're never done learning. So put that into perspective for me in a timeline in the jiu-jitsu world. What is you said it gives it's taught you patience because it's taken so much time. It takes so much time to kind of advance through. What does the advancement through jiu-jitsu look like? Why does it take so much time?
That's also different. I'll speak quickly and then let Mr. Streicher go, but that's also different for everybody, and depending on how much time you have to devote to train, and who your instructors are, and how much you're competing or not competing. There's so many different ways, but I was a relatively slower path. I was a white belt for 5 years. I was a blue belt for 4 years. I was a purple belt for 4 years, and then a brown belt for about 2 years. So it was about 14 years all in all on my path to black belt. And I would say probably around the purple belt, maybe about halfway through, I didn't even think about the belts anymore. I just, they were still my goal. I definitely still wanted to achieve my black belt. And now I love rolling today more than ever. I absolutely love it. So, but yeah, I would show up to class and train if there were no belts. I just fell in love with it. But just time on the mat and experience, and being in each position thousands and tens of thousands of times gives you the reflexes.
Countless hours. Yeah. Mike, do you have anything different?
Yeah, the same, actually kind of the same for me. My progression has been a little bit slower. I think I've been in jiu-jitsu for probably maybe 12, 13 years, but had been out a little bit with the ACL, MCL tear. I had a double hip replacement and a back injury, so I took a little bit of time off, but for the most part, tried to stay on top of training in between. For me, it was never really about the belts. I've attained different ranks and different arts over the years, so it really wasn't so much about the belt, especially the reason that I got into it was bullying. The first thing that's in my mind is always self-defense. What I'm learning, how is this going to work in the real
Mm-hmm.
life? And that really for me that was my belt in my head, is how well could I protect myself? And if I could protect myself, that is my black belt. I don't need anything else. So my progression was a little bit slower. One of the things, I've got to say is one of the things I really like about jiu-jitsu is that I feel like, especially I'm a lot older than Keith, as he mentioned earlier, nicely. Um, as I've trained and gotten older and with different injuries, your body changes really quick, your endurance and all that stuff, no matter how much you train. And jiu-jitsu is something that I feel can be a little bit more gentle on the body. It's not always gentle, but it can be a little bit more gentle on the joints. I know with karate and taekwondo, especially the higher rank we get, the more jumping and kicking and spinning. And some of that, I know that I've personally had a little bit tougher time with different injuries and stuff. And jiu-jitsu, I feel like you can modify and do different things from different positions, and you can control it a little bit more. And the one other thing too with kicking arts versus ground arts is with jiu-jitsu, like Keith was talking about earlier. If you get in a bad situation, you have a choice to make. You either tap or you get injured. So that choice is yours. So you can, determine that outcome on your own pretty much. But that is the one good thing. If I find that I'm in a bad position, I feel like something's not going to go the right way, I can just tap and, we restart, we try to rekindle and figure out, hey, what did I do wrong not to be in that position? I don't feel bad. My partner doesn't feel bad because they hurt me in any way. And with a lot of the kicking arts, I know from doing a lot of more full contact kicking and striking when I was a lot younger, when you took a kick and you missed the block and you got kicked in the ribs and your ribs broke, that's something that, it stayed with you for a couple of weeks until it
Mm-hmm.
healed. And for the other person on the other side, because nobody is out to hurt each other, especially when you're training with friends, but things happen. And it's very difficult to control kicks, especially when you're throwing them fast. Try to score on another fast person. It's just a different level. So I found myself being injured that way, several times over the years at a lot younger age when I did more full contact. And I do feel like jiu-jitsu, we can control more of that from a safety aspect.
Yeah, once that finally kind of settled in for me that I have the choice, I think like I consider myself an early tapper. I tap very early because I had, as you know, Mike, I had an injury last year to fracture tibia, and then I have some injuries with my neck this year. And I know now from experience, there is no way I'm putting myself in a position just to have that outcome. So the choice is really critical to know once you're training that you have that ability. Who is BJJ for? Who is it for everyone? Can anyone do it?
I think anybody can do it. Yeah, it's just a lot of that has to do with the teacher, if it's being taught the right way,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of body style, size, height, weight, all that good stuff. Anybody can learn jujitsu. Um, it's attributes always play into learning any martial art like anything. But
Mm-hmm.
everybody is on a different course, where one person might take 10 years to get a black belt, another might take 15 or 20. And, it shouldn't really be about the belt again. It should be about the journey and, seeing yourself improve every day. And I think one of the biggest things, and I think Keith touched on this earlier, is, the consistent training. And one of the things I've been doing a lot of this with the kids recently, I've always done this on the karate side, but I've been implementing it into jiu-jitsu now from a leadership level, is where the biggest complaint I hear from parents is that the kids don't practice at home. And a lot of that is because whether it's karate or jiu-jitsu, a lot of times they don't have a partner to practice with at home. Usually, moms and dads are so busy doing all the stuff that they have to do, they can't effectively practice with the kids because they don't know the stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
what I've been trying to do with the kids in jiu-jitsu is typically in order to build a habit, it takes about 30 days of doing something consistently, and then it starts to trigger that they do it automatically. So whatever the skill that we do, like the other day we were working Americanas, paintbrush technique, and I told the kids, if you go home and practice 10 of these with your parents, you can bring a note in the next day and get an award on your belt. And man, that triggered the kids right away to go home and practice. So now you've got a student that's going home and practicing. The parents are seeing that. And then as the kids come back, they're also getting better too because they've done that technique 10 more times than they did in class that day.
I mean, there's so much to unpack there in terms of like how that correlates in the workplace. Managers and leaders leveraging rewards, recognitions, incentives to kind of help move and change behaviors on their team to support them in going a certain direction. I love that you kind of drew that out for everyone. Keith, did you have anything else to add?
Uh, no, I think he nailed it. Absolutely.
Awesome. So I have one last question for you all. And of course, I would like in terms of BJJ and leadership and how they connect, I would love to. I'm a big proponent of leadership development program, building designs that are creative for our workplaces. I would love to have a program out there in an organization that promotes this or has this as an option for BJJ training or something like that. Do you guys think that that would be feasible? I'm pitching here for other leaders.
You're thinking for a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu leadership program?
Yeah, wouldn't that be cool?
I think it'd be amazing. Um, we're actually not to pitch our own program, but we're actually developing it is martial arts related leadership program that's being packaged up because we've had a leadership program at our school for 15 plus years that we implement all throughout our training, and we're actually packaging it up into videos that other schools can implement into their classes, and
Wow.
it's not just for Taekwondo; it can be used for any martial art. The videos have kids and adults with Taekwondo uniforms on, but the activities and lessons. The first one that we're doing is for the 6 to 12-year-old range. Different leadership lessons and activities that they instructors can implement into their schools. But I think martial arts can teach leadership without a specific leadership program. But when you have, and this from experience, and I know Mr. Streicher has a great leadership program, and we do as well. When you have very specific leadership training, 15 minutes of all of our classes are devoted to leadership training, and there's different drills and activities, and they use martial arts to practice leadership. You see some amazing growth in the kids, and you'd be surprised what kids, teenagers, adults, how much they love it, and then also how much I've had kids that it's impacted their lives at school, and they're really coming out of their shell. I had a
Wow.
professor at our local university say it's changed his career just going through our martial arts and leadership program, in his confidence and the way he approaches his students, and the way that he is getting recognized in his career as well. So on all ends of the spectrum, when you have that very specific leadership training, it can be amazing. So I am in 1,000% agreement with the Jiu-Jitsu leadership program.
I'm going to work on it. I'm going to try. This is my first step towards
I
that.
love it. I love it.
Okay, so now I have one final question. Unless you, Mike, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my final question, I wrap up all my episodes with this, is what is the most recent paradigm shift that you've experienced, whether it's related to this or outside of that?
Okay,
Mike.
that's actually what I was going to key in on the end of Keith's thing there. So I think when we're talking about leadership, I think one of the biggest paradigm shifts, and I've seen a bunch of them over the years within martial arts in general, and within society as well. But one of the biggest things and most recent, obviously, has been the COVID pandemic and all of that, where I know in North Carolina, personally, our schools were closed down for 6 months plus. And I think coming out of that, that's when I really realized how important leadership is, because our students basically went for almost 6 months without having that in class, where we had, the opportunity to work with those kids. And you can see that gap. It was very, it was very, I don't know how to put this, but like when the kids got back into class, you can tell they had not been working on any kind of leadership stuff, because the work ethic and a lot of the stuff had kind of dwindled. And
Mm.
it really hit me right after that, that what we do is so important for these kids, because what they're learning at these young ages is what's going to stick with them forever. And I think that's so important. So I think COVID's probably one of the biggest paradigm shifts that we've seen. And it like accelerated a whole
Mm-hmm.
generational change, because I have seen over the years, it seems like every like 5 to 8 years, the it changes just a little bit within society. I feel like parents are being a little bit too easy on the kids, to where they're doing everything for the kids. And I think one of the biggest things for me growing up as a kid is my parents made me do stuff on my own. And I
Mm-hmm.
really think that that's the way that you learn, because I think that you do need to make mistakes. We talked about this earlier, and it's the mistakes that help to shape us into a better
Yeah.
person and to learn, because you can't learn without making mistakes. And I think nowadays I'm seeing too much of that, as parents make excuses for everything. And, they also just do things for the kids, and then the kids don't have the opportunity to learn. They don't have opportunity to make the mistakes.
That's huge. So,
Children are perfect. I wasn't perfect. My parents weren't
yeah.
perfect. And, that's just the way it is. And that is how we get better, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it builds self-efficacy, which is like the belief that I can do something on my own, right? Like I can go out and accomplish these things, and without having that supported from a parent, then you are just relying on everyone else, or it's playing back into that victimhood
Yeah.
mentality and perspective, right?
And everybody has bad things that happen to them. I don't care who you are. Any successful person has had something, bad that's happened, and it's how
Mm-hmm.
you rekindle from those things. And I think that's really important. So whether it's, getting good at martial arts, being successful in whatever you do in your life, you're going to run into those obstacles, and it's how we overcome those obstacles that is going to determine our success one way or another.
The comeback is better than the setback.
Yeah.
I like that.
What about you, Keith? What's your most recent paradigm shift?
I honestly think, and we've touched on it today already a little bit, but it is community. And 20 years ago, most jiu-jitsu was not known very well. Um, it was rare to have a blue belt in town. Now, man, there's black belts everywhere. Jiu-jitsu's all over the internet, and MMA, and it's really made it popular. And so we've gone in 20 years from hardly anyone knowing about jiu-jitsu um, to it being known, worldwide. And the sense of community, and especially with kind of what Mr. Streicher said with COVID just happening, coming back from being isolated and being at home, and not seeing our friends and things. The community right now is just like tighter than ever. People want to belong; they want to be a part of something, and it's not just a community within your school; it's a community uh, around the world. Wherever you go, there's people that you can connect with, and that kind of correlates with our business as well. We've really upped our, the last 6 to 12 months, we've really upped the amount of our staff trainings, and getting our staff together a lot more, and being a tighter unit. And it's been tremendous, especially the last 6 months, in our own uh, business. Just, and some of it, a lot of it is training and work related, and some of it's just fun. So we just get the staff out, and go do something fun, and bond, and get everybody to get the friendships going. And so that kind of cohesiveness is spilling over into the workplace, into our school. Everybody's tight. Everybody knows the mission. Everybody's communicating well. So I just think community. I think people want to be a part and belong to something, and it's just really strong right now. That's how I feel.
That's amazing. Yeah, and you get everyone rowing in the boat in the same direction, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah, and I
Well,
think that's so important too. I was talking to
mhm.
Chris Tower, is one of the black belts that helps instruct out at our school on Monday nights, and then he's over at our Fort Mill school at other nights. But one of the things that he noticed too, and I didn't really think about it as much until he mentioned this, but he was sitting back watching me teach. I think I was teaching our leadership class actually, and he's like, "Wow, you've got a lot of the big kids are back now, and the kids are becoming so tight again, the teenagers, and you can see them working together on their own time when they have downtime and dissecting the techniques, and it's been really exciting to see. And it was really cool for Chris to point that out, because he's the next generation ahead of me, a little bit older, and he's kind of seeing the kids working together in that leadership aspect. So that was really cool. And I think I really like the way Keith was talking about community. And we're kind of stuck, I feel like, in our own bubbles. He's in Johnson City, and he's got his little bubble of Johnson City people that train and do ninja stuff. And we kind of have the same thing here in Charlotte, and also in South Carolina here, right across the border. And we have such a cool community. And one of the things that we were working on a little bit through COVID, and we've been working on this real hard every day, week in and week out, is building this like kind of like mega community, where we're building within the metaverse in that whole realm with our Hyde Park Ninjas program. And I think this is going to be a fantastic way to not only touch the people within our communities at home, but now bringing this worldwide, where now we're connecting with people from Europe, from Rio de Janeiro. We got people in the US. And it's just been a great opportunity for us to connect with people all over the world and really bring that martial arts community together real tight knit.
Gotta love technology, right? I'll put more of that information for anyone who's interested in the show notes. But I want to thank both of you, not only for your time today for this chat, but for building the next generation of leaders, because that's ultimately what you're doing, and that's going to impact and have a contagion effect in the world. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, and congratulations to you on what you're doing too, because I think leadership, there is such a need for this in today's world. And I think it's really great what you're doing and providing.
Thank you so much, Mike. All right. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to leave a review, rate, and subscribe wherever you're listening. If you know a business leader in practice or friend who you think would be interested in this episode, please consider sharing it with them. I am so grateful for your support. For more updates, you can follow us at Paradigm Shifts Podcast on Instagram. See you on the next episode.